The first thing I noticed was not the open safe, it was the silence. My house had always made small noises, the refrigerator humming, the old clock ticking in the hallway, the floor settling near the back room, but that evening everything felt like it was holding its breath. Then I stepped into my study and saw the steel door hanging open, and I knew someone had walked into my home, taken exactly what they wanted, and left believing I would never prove it. My name is Raymond Hale, and before I retired, I spent 32 years as a detective in Tulsa, Oklahoma, chasing men who thought confidence was the same thing as intelligence. I had seen burglars break windows, counterfeiters burn records, and suspects smile because they were certain they had cleaned up every mistake. But the ones who worried me most were always the people who believed the rules did not apply to them. I had been away for 2 nights visiting my daughter in Kansas, and when I came home, nothing looked disturbed. The porch light was on, the mail was stacked on the counter, and the cash beside the pantry was untouched. Whoever came inside had not been looking for money or electronics. They had gone straight to the study and opened a safe bolted into the foundation. 5 registered firearms were missing, along with 2 antique cases and a handwritten inventory book I had kept for years. The keypad was clean, the door was undamaged, and the camera system showed 46 minutes of missing footage, erased so neatly that even I had to respect the patience behind it. I did not call the police right away, not because I thought I was above procedure, but because procedure had taught me never to announce what I knew before I understood what I was seeing. I photographed the room, marked the time, checked every window, then sat at my kitchen table with black coffee and a yellow legal pad. The same way I had started cases back when my knees did not complain every time I stood up. Only a few people knew I would be gone. My daughter, my neighbor, and the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association, because 3 days earlier, its president, Lorraine Vance, had sent me an email demanding an interior inspection over what she called an unauthorized storage concern. I had replied with one word, no. Lorraine had spent 6 years turning a neighborhood committee into her private kingdom, issuing fines over mailbox paint, lawn chairs, wind chimes, and one plastic flamingo that apparently threatened Western civilization. She also controlled a neighborhood patrol led by a former security contractor named Paula Wren, and people whispered that Paula's team still had old builder keys to half the houses in Cedar Ridge. I had dismissed those stories as gossip. Until that night, I walked back to the hallway, looked at the wooden clock above the coat rack, and remembered the tiny camera I had hidden inside it years earlier, a battery-powered recorder with no internet connection and no way to disable it remotely. When I opened the footage, 4 women entered my home at 10:18 in the morning using a key, no hesitation, no forced door, no fear. Paula was first, 2 patrol officers followed, and then Lorraine stepped into view, looked toward my study, and pointed. They moved through my house like they had done it before, and the way they laughed told me something worse than death had happened there. I had just found the beginning of a much larger case. I watched that footage 3 times, not because I doubted what I was seeing, but because 32 years in police work had trained me to separate anger from evidence, and right then I had plenty of one and not nearly enough of the other. Lorraine stood in my hallway with the kind of relaxed posture people have when they think the building belongs to them, while Paula directed the patrol officers from room to room, opening closets, checking drawers, and speaking in low voices that the camera could not fully capture. 17 minutes into the recording, Lorraine pointed at the safe, Paula knelt beside the keypad, and one of the younger women pulled something from a tool bag. That was all I needed to know about how they got in, but it still did not explain where my property had gone or how many other houses they had entered. So I made 3 copies of the footage, stored them in 3 different places, then spent the rest of the night building a timeline. By sunrise, the theft no longer looked random, it looked organized. The next afternoon, I opened an old tracking app on my phone, hoping a small device I had hidden months earlier inside one of the antique cases was still alive. I had installed it after hearing about collectors being targeted across the state, and at the time my daughter had laughed and told me I was treating retirement like an undercover assignment. The little dot blinked once, disappeared, then came back less than half a mile away, directly behind the Cedar Ridge clubhouse. The HOA maintained a storage building there, a plain metal structure used for holiday decorations, lawn equipment, and whatever else Lorraine did not want residents asking about. I drove past that evening without stopping, then returned the next night and parked behind a closed gas station across the service road. Around 9:15, a pickup truck rolled into the maintenance yard. Paula got out with another patrol officer, and together they unloaded a generator that still had a store tag hanging from the handle. followed by a commercial mower that looked too new to belong to any HOA crew I had ever seen. They carried both inside like grocery bags. That was when the case changed. It was no longer about 5 missing firearms. It was about a system. Over the next 4 days, I spoke quietly with neighbors, never leading with my own story, just asking whether anything had ever disappeared after an HOA inspection. At first, people shrugged, looked over their shoulders, and said they did not want trouble. Then one man told me about a pressure washer taken from his garage because it supposedly violated a rule about chemical storage. A retired teacher said her generator vanished after Paula inspected a noise complaint. An older widow named Edith showed me an empty corner where her late husband's tool chest used to sit, and when she protested, Lorraine told her it had been reassigned for community maintenance. Reassigned was a nice word for stolen, the kind of word people use when they want a crime to sound like paperwork. Edith had not fought back because Lorraine threatened fines, legal fees, and a lien on her home. That part stayed with me. Lorraine was not powerful because the bylaws gave her power. She was powerful because people believed she could ruin their lives. I started the case file for every story. Names, dates, missing items, estimated value, witnesses, and the exact rule the HOA claimed had been violated. Most of those rules did not exist. Some were twisted beyond recognition. Others had been invented entirely. I met with 2 attorneys I trusted from my years on the force, along with an old partner named Calvin Reese, who had become a private investigator after retirement. They reviewed the footage, the tracker location, and the witness statements. Then Calvin leaned back and said, "Raymond, this is not a bad HOA. This is a burglary crew with matching uniforms. We could have gone to the police then, but we all knew the danger of moving too early. Lorraine could empty the storage building, destroy records, and tell her people exactly what to say. What we needed was not another story about what they had done. We needed them to show us what they would do when they believed no one was watching." So I sent Lorraine an email saying I had decided to sell my home and move closer to my daughter, and that I wanted one final compliance walkthrough before listing it. She replied in 23 minutes. The inspection was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. By Wednesday night, my house held 12 hidden cameras, 4 audio recorders, door sensors, synchronized timestamps, a decoy safe in the garage, an unlocked display case filled with worthless antiques, and a locked cabinet in my study designed to tempt anyone who had forgotten the difference between authority and permission. The lawyers and Calvin would watch everything remotely. The police had been briefed and were waiting for my call. Thursday arrived bright and warm, and at exactly 2 o'clock, Lorraine stepped onto my porch with Paula and 3 uniformed patrol officers behind her. She smiled when I opened the door, glanced past me into the hallway, and said, "Well, Raymond, I'm glad you finally decided to cooperate." I stepped aside and smiled back, because by then, cooperation was exactly what I wanted from her. Lorraine walked through my house like she was touring property she already owned, commenting on outlet covers while Paula and the patrol officers drifted into separate rooms. I stayed close enough to hear them, but not close enough to make them cautious. In the garage, one officer lifted a set of vintage wrenches from my workbench while Paula crouched beside the decoy safe and tested the handle. Lorraine eventually reached my study, where the locked cabinet sat beside the desk, exactly where I had placed it. She tried the handle, glanced toward the hallway, then pulled a thin metal tool from her jacket. Paula stepped into the doorway behind her, and Lorraine said, "Check the garage again. If he kept anything after the last collection, I want it documented." That sentence changed everything. It was not suspicion anymore, not a retired detective connecting dots because he missed the job. It was an admission, spoken clearly into 4 microphones and watched live by 2 attorneys and Calvin. Then one of the younger officers noticed an old pocket watch in the display case, opened the door, and slipped it into her uniform pocket as casually as if she were taking a mint from a restaurant counter. I let another 30 seconds pass, then stepped into the room. Lorraine froze with the tool against the cabinet lock. I told her the inspection was over. She straightened up and said, "Raymond, you invited us here, so do not start creating drama now." I pointed toward the monitor and turned it on. 12 camera feeds appeared at once, every angle stamped with the same time. Lorraine working the lock, Paula searching the garage, the officer pocketing the watch. Nobody spoke. Paula looked toward the front door, but Calvin and the attorneys were already walking in as 2 police cars turned into the driveway. Lorraine tried to explain that the HOA had enforcement authority, then claimed the watch had been taken for safekeeping. The officer who stole it started crying before Lorraine finished the sentence. Paula was the first to ask for a private conversation. By that evening, police had the footage from my hidden confog, the GPS signal from my stolen case, statements from 9 residents, and enough probable cause to search the HOA storage building. What they found made the local news. Generators, tools, lawn equipment, cameras, jewelry, family keepsakes, and all 5 of my firearms were stacked inside, tagged with fake violation notes going back nearly 4 years. More than 30 families identified property. Lorraine was arrested, Paula cooperated, and the Cedar Ridge Board was dissolved while civil lawsuits piled up faster than Lorraine had once mailed out fines. Months later, I watched Edith hold her husband's tool chest again, and that moment meant more to me than seeing Lorraine led away in handcuffs. My firearms were returned, and a new board took over under rules residents could actually read before voting on them. Still, one question never went away. Some neighbors said I should have called the police the first night because letting Lorraine enter again created unnecessary risk. Others said the trap was the only reason the whole operation was exposed. I know where I stand, but I want to know what you think. Did I handle it the right way, or did I cross a line by letting them walk into a setup they built for themselves? Leave your answer in the comments and share this story with anyone who needs a reminder that authority without accountability is just intimidation wearing a badge.